we'll start off with the agenda now. We'll officially start this meeting. It's being webcast, and so therefore we'll go with the agenda. As our normal procedure, I will mention names first. So, as you can see on the top, on the left, if you could start mentioning your names in that order. So I'm Mohammed Iqbal. I'll be chairing this police and crime panel meeting today by virtual means.
Shall I read the names out? I think that might be easier if I read everyone's name out who we've got on the call. We've got...
Sorry, couldn't hear you. Could you speak up?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We've got Councillor Stuart Heckenstall. We've got Gillian Marshall for Wakefield Legal. We've got Councillor Kevin Swift. We've got Joanne Sykes. We've got Samantha Wilkinson. We've got Mark Burns-Williamson. We've got Amanda Carter. We've got Cahill Burke. We've got Mohammed Iqbal. Sorry, you've introduced yourself already. We've got Peter Gruen. We've got Jane Sykes. And we've got Mark Thompson. We've got Councillor Masood Ahmed. We've got Councillor Mohammed Naeem. Councillor Richard Dunbar. Roger Grasby. We've got Sophie Whitaker. And Tariq Hussain.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sam. So,
Chair, apologies for interrupting. The Chief Constable's just messaged me to say, could you open up the telephone conference too so that he can join?
Unfortunately, Jane, we don't have that facility at Wakefield.
I'll let him know and he'll keep trying. He's just having technical problems at his end.
Okay.
Okay. Can I first of all begin by mentioning the sad news and the loss of Councillor Alan Wassell, who was the vice chair of the panel. He was a great asset to people of Wakefield and West Yorkshire with his service on the West Yorkshire Police and Crime Panel. His commitment and dedication is really appreciated. Due to the circumstances, we're not able to attend the funeral. The panel will send a card and flowers if the family allows, and I hope that sometime in future we will be able to hold a celebration for his life contribution to the city and West Yorkshire if the opportunity arises. So I'd like to mention that, and in replacement of Alan, we've got Councillor Kevin Smith from Wakefield, but now until next AGM. Amanda, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, panel members' point of view, how hard Alan worked and how well respected he was. He was not just a very, very nice man, but he was passionate about his community, he was passionate about policing, and you couldn't have wished for somebody who could more into public life than him. And it was a pleasure to have known him.
Did you want to say something? Councillor Masood? Masood Ahmed? Okay, you wanted to maybe still having technical issues, so Councillor Masood Ahmed. Fine. So that's that. I'm sorry, I did deliberately switch my camera off. It's gone off. And when I went upstairs, and I don't know if it won't come on, so I'd rather have the voice than the camera. Okay, that was the item one. Sorry, apologies.
Sorry, Chair, it's Mark, Police and Crime Commissioner. Can I just add to those comments? I've knew Alan for many years, actually, before he became a member of the Police and Crime Panel. And obviously, I just wanted to add my condolences and, say that, my experience of Alan was exactly as being said, that he was very hardworking and stalwart within the community, within within Normanton, the ward that he represented. And I always felt, as vice chair of the police and crime panel, that he always dealt with things very fairly and proportionately. So I just wanted to add those comments, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Myself, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to just come in. I don't know if you can still see me or not. Can you? Or can you just hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to echo the same as the other colleagues. I mean, I've been on off the panel for quite some time, and having known Alan for a very long time, and especially I just not as a panel member, but for his constituents of Wakefield and the surrounding area. I mean, I was fortunate to see him about 5 weeks ago, and as his usual self, he was just chirpy as he was and happy and saying to me, continue the hard work that you're doing. So I just want to echo what everybody else said, and it'll be a great loss for the panel. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Russell. Yes, we all appreciate the work done by Councillor Wassel. Okay, that's in terms of apologies, Sam, what have we got missing? Yeah. Terry, sorry, carry on. Councillor Stewart Tempton, so.
Could I just offer my condolences to Alan's family? Alan for almost 40 years in one way or another as part of the most politically and whatever they did, he was committed to 100%.
Yeah.
This last year or two, apart from the panel and other committee members, a lot of work for the food bank, it's not even like a great loss to the council and to its residents within the moment. And again, I offer my condolences.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Terry, did you want to speak?
Yeah. Alan and I, every break we used to go downstairs. I've known him a few years now, but what a lovely man he was. And he was quite open, honest, and straight on, proper Yorkshire lad. And he did a lot of good work for Wakefield and for the panel. And he'll sadly be missed. And my condolences to all his family, and our thoughts are, as a panel, I suppose, with the family of Alan. And may God bless him.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Terry. I mean, I used to enjoy the coffee after the panel meeting, with him, and he was a totally different guy. I know his sister very well, Judy Boxer. Totally different characters, if people know Judy. She's a good friend of mine, with all the just deal with respect. But he was totally different, true Yorkshireman. He loved his curry. Okay, item 2. Any apologies in terms of apologies, Sam, who have we got missing?
Yes, I think the only apologies we've got now are from Councillor Russell Brown. Everybody else looks like they've managed to get onto the call.
Okay, right, good. That's excellent for the first time. I think anything first time is always a bit chaotic. We've been struggling now that the full panel is here. I'd like to thank, before I go on to item 2, I'd like to thank Sam, who's been running around all day trying to contact each individual panel member to set them up. And believe it or not, I couldn't get going yesterday, and we struggled right up to 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Then I was on with City Council IT about 6 o'clock in the morning. They were finally able to get me connected at 8 o'clock, and Sam was there waiting, So, Sam, thank you for all that effort and work to get us going. I'm sure second time will be easier than swift. Okay, so we've got the apologies. So, is there any urgent item that needs to be brought to the attention of the panel? Okay. Item 4, interest. Stuart, Councillor Stuart, so do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a grandson who is seeking to get employment with West Riding Police Force and move forward on that job. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. We know the Chief Constable is continuing with technical issues, so we'll see how it goes. That takes us on to item 5, which is the report of the PCC on the response to COVID-19, which I hope you've all seen and read. Commissioner, did you want to make any comments, speak on the report before any questions?
Yes, Chair, if that's okay. Can I firstly check that everybody can hear okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Right. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Great. And again, just add my thanks as well, Chair, to Sam and yourself and everybody behind the scenes in enabling this meeting to take place. Clearly, we're all having to adapt to the current circumstances, and no doubt learning about new technology platforms and Skyping and Zoom and FaceTime, Microsoft Teams, these are all becoming more familiar terms. So thank you for enabling the panel meeting to take place, because I think it is important that we do our best to ensure we fulfil our roles around this at obviously a time of national sort of crisis and pandemic. So I'll just give a brief overview of the report that I've submitted. It's quite comprehensive, but I'm sure there'll be questions that will follow. I did invite the Chief Constable to join the meeting, which he agreed to do, but clearly at the moment he appears to be having problems accessing the technology.
I'm here now, Mark. I'm here under subterfuge under the name Dan Ware, so I'm with you from when you started.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Thank you, John. That's appreciated for you to give me time to the panel meeting this morning at a time of, I know how busy you and everybody is at West Yorkshire Police. So, Chair, I'll just give an overview. So I'll run through the report. So on the first page, that just gives a little bit of background to the circumstances around how COVID-19 has affected the workings of myself, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the office. And of course, we're having to look at the impact on the Police and Crime Plan, which is obviously the main way in which I hold West Yorkshire Police to account. But I'm sure you will appreciate we've had to put in place some extraordinary arrangements, and I'll just touch on those. Again, by way of background, you'll be aware that some of the key decisions at the government level regarding the guidance, particularly the one that was announced on the 24th of March that led to the current lockdown restrictions as they are referred to. And at the time of writing this paper, I think we were about 3 weeks into that. And clearly things have moved on a little bit since then, which we'll try and touch on in terms of latest updates a bit further on. You'll see on page 2 some of the things we've put in place regarding daily conversations with the Chief Constable and the Deputy Chief Constable, but also making sure we have a weekly bilateral meeting to consider all the updates across the piece regarding crime trends and lots of other issues, both at a West Yorkshire and indeed a national level in terms of some of the conversations that we are having. And again, we've just bullet pointed there a few of the considerations that we have on those regular weekly conversations. Pleased to say we're also linked into the West Yorkshire Local Resilience Forum. Again, some of you will be aware of that group. That consists of not just the police but all the councils health service, public health, all the fire and rescue, ambulance service, really critical strategic planning that takes place every day. So Jane, as the chief executive, dials into that meeting, and I get feedback around key issues so that we are working together, doing what we can to help each other to provide and respond to the pandemic in West Yorkshire. You will also be aware that I actually commissioned directly a number of services, particularly victims services, and it's really important that I move quickly to reassure those services, and indeed the ones that we work with as partners as well, regarding the coordination, funding, adding my support and trying to reassure all people providing these services, albeit in different ways, that I am here to assist and work with them in providing services to vulnerable victims in particular. And we are feeding into the Ministry of Justice, who provide funding through my office to some of those services. And as you can imagine, there's no end of virtual calls and meetings that have taken place. Just moving on to page 3, we also have in place a domestic violence and sexual abuse board for West Yorkshire, and they're meeting regularly as well, as we are keeping a very close eye on the statistics around domestic abuse, domestic violence. And we provided a table there, and that information was to the 19th of April again, when these papers were sent over. And whilst domestic violence, domestic abuse incidents generally are looking relatively stable, I think we're all aware that there are big increases to people contacting the helplines, and some of those services have already referenced around providing support. So we feel there will probably be a much more reporting of domestic related incidents once the restrictions start to be lifted, but we are doing what we can to encourage people to report things in where possible, and inform them that many of the services around victim support, around domestic violence and domestic abuse are still available. So we're working hard to ensure we're raising awareness all the time. Again, on page 3 just lists a number of the calls we're having, for example, with Restorative Justice and Victim Support Services, the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, the service that's still available there, and making sure we're linking in with many other partners, particularly in the public health space as well. Moving on to page 4, I chair the Local Criminal Justice Board for West Yorkshire, and that brings together the courts, the Crown Prosecution Service, police, probation, prisons. I called an extraordinary meeting a couple of weeks back, and we've now put in place a 2-weekly meeting on that, because clearly we've got real concerns regarding the cases that will be delayed and adjourned during this period. And whilst the 2 calls that I've convened so far have been very useful and productive, there are some real blockages within the courts because of the social distancing measures that are currently being followed. So we're trying to work through some of those issues the best we can, and I'm making representations at a national level as well, because clearly they are following national guidance at the moment, but we are clearly concerned regarding the build-up of cases and the backlogs that will inevitably arise. So I think we all have to work together within the criminal justice side of things to deal with the cases that can be dealt with according to irregularity status, but also looking at the technology links from custody areas, for example, from prisons, and utilising that the best we can. But it's not easy, and there are significant cases that have already built up. So going into quite a bit of detail there, I'm sure the Chief Constable will have some comments on that a little bit later as well, and we've been talking very regularly about some of those. But clearly, whilst we're supportive of the lockdown legislation, we have to be cited on some of the issues that are being built up during this period. So we'll continue to work with all our colleagues in criminal justice to try and move things forward. Just then moving to the police response on page 5. Now this has been termed Operation Ginman. I won't say too much about this at the moment, so I know the Chief Constable will go into more detail. But basically, this is being put in place as a response to the National Operation Tower, which it was put in place at the national level. And this is the name and the goal strategy for the West Yorkshire Police Response. And again, we've listed there on page 5 all the sort of key areas around calls that are coming in, the custody through reports, the crime trends around missing persons, antisocial behaviour. I'll just come on to those in a little while. But I have to say, I think the approach from West Yorkshire Police has been the right one in my view so far, around the 4 E's, which goes on to page 6, around engage, explain, encourage and enforce. And we know this is a difficult time for everybody within our communities having to comply with these restrictions, but I'm pleased to say that the vast majority of the public have so far cooperated and complied with that. But of course, there are always cases where people don't, and quite rightly, where the police have tried to engage and explain and encourage. If that doesn't work, people have been spoken to on a number of occasions, or they can't explain for good reason why they are in a certain place or doing certain activity, then enforcement will follow as a last resort. So we're watching that very closely. I certainly have casework coming in as well. But again, I know the Chief Constable will want to touch on the sort of operational response to that. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on the national picture as well regarding the National Police Chiefs Council and the data that they're collating. And you might have seen some of the national reports that they're putting out. And again, at the time of the data that we had to hand when we produced this report, West Yorkshire issued, I think, around about 121 fines at that time. But we were certainly, in comparison to the size of West Yorkshire, fairly well placed within that national comparison. But I think some of that data needs to be viewed with caution because of the different sort of geography and demographics in areas throughout England and Wales. But again, overall, I'm reassured that the approach has been right. Page 7 and 8 talks about some of the public engagement. It's really important, of course, that neighbour policing teams are out there engaging wherever they can and providing some visibility and reassurance to the public. That's been happening. From my own point of view, obviously, the office is now working fully agile, but to take that decision quite early on. So we are absolutely following the advice around working from home where we can. The team in the office have responded really well. Clearly, we all know about juggling family commitments and trying to do things from home in difficult circumstances, but we are making sure we're supporting all colleagues, not just in West Yorkshire Police, but in the office as well, regarding any welfare issues. And obviously there I've listed obviously the social media side of things, these types of meetings around Skype and different platforms, constantly getting messages out there to partners and the public around the activities that I'm undertaking, liaising with and supporting the police and our partners as well. I've been producing some weekly bulletins, which hopefully you will have had sight of, that have been sent out to yourselves and lots of others, key partners around West Yorkshire. We're publicising those, of course, on social media and on the website. And then just some other work to highlight. We launched an extraordinary Safer Communities Fund grant round because obviously recognised issues around potential domestic and sexual abuse, mental health, drugs and alcohol services, fraud, things that we all sort of suspect will come to the fore. So the grant round is very much aimed at seeking applications for grants up to £6,000 to actually deliver services targeted particularly at those issues. We're looking to turn that around pretty quickly by the end of May with regards to the applications that we receive. The closing date for that, I think there's another week to go for people to submit applications, but we've had a good level of interest on social media, so we are anticipating a number of applications to come in, so we'll look at those pretty quickly. Also working with all those projects that have currently had funding, because obviously the world that we're now in is very different to the one that we all envisaged a few weeks ago. So again, just working with them to provide some flexibility and reassurance around how they can move forward in this period. Engaging with the third sector, voluntary sector, very important. And again, I've approved some funding to each of the third sector coordination groups in each of the districts. It's really important. They've got a key role to play during this time, and I know many of you are involved in some of those organisations. We continue to engage with young people. Again, important, obviously, with all schools and education sort of establishments mainly being closed at the moment. The violence reduction unit work continues. That's important because we had confirmation of another year's funding pretty much prior to the COVID period. But again, we're having to adapt and flex the work because of the circumstances. Been very active on communications, as I've said, social media, press releases, doing whatever we can to get messages out there. I've also been arranging briefings with West Yorkshire MPs, another one of those this afternoon. It's important, clearly, to keep the parliamentarians in the loop as well. And then just moving on to page 10, where it goes into more detail around some of the national meetings we've been having at the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and looking at the stats actually regarding the West Yorkshire information. Again, this information was up until the 16th of April, and I know Sean will talk to a more updated position a little bit later. And the table, or the sort of paragraph there that we've provided, at the time of writing the report, the total crime had reduced by about 24.4% in West Yorkshire compared to a national reduction of 28%. And going into a bit more detail, seeing some significant falls around serious assaults, personal robbery, rape, residential burglary, shoplifting. Clearly, we need to caveat all this with the situation we are in, but those were the figures provided at that time. And interestingly, even though we have seen a drop in calls to 999, providing that reassurance to our communities in terms of visibility. And then finally, Chair, just as I've said, we took the decision to close the office some while ago around agile working, but I have to give credit to the West Yorkshire Police IT department who have done a magnificent job, not just for our office, but across policing in West Yorkshire in making sure kit and connectivity is there. So I think we've been particularly well placed with some of the previous decisions we've made on IT and investment, with the help of yourselves, of course, through the budget meetings. And we continue to speak daily, myself and the Chief Constable, getting updates on the gold groups and the Chief Officer team and everybody in West Yorkshire Police, officers, staff, volunteers, people who have come back from retirement, all playing that role. And of course, I'm sure all of us support the Clap for the Carers initiative that we did last night, but we also need to recognise the work of the police and other emergency services, fire and rescue, ambulance, key workers, whether that's refuse collectors, postal workers, all doing a magnificent job in very difficult times. Chair, I'll stop there and invite any comments and questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. You're right. You're right. We need to appreciate the work of all other agencies who are working day in, day out without reducing their workforce or reduction in service. So they need to be appreciated as well. Well said. I was just wondering, are you mindful of, we want reassurance that due to COVID and reduction in staff because of isolation, serious crimes are not overlooked or the investigation work is not affected?
No, they're certainly not. And I will bring John in perhaps a moment or two. But again, we're monitoring the sickness absence levels very closely at the moment. It's around about between 7 and 8%, which is actually 2 or 3 percentage points below the national average. So it was higher than that to start with around the self-isolation and the wider impact, but it seems to have stabilised. John, I don't know whether you wanted to come in at that point.
Yes, I can do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, John. Yeah, I'm way up.
Apologies for the false start. We're just having some trouble. We were on it for half an hour before and we tested it this morning, so it's all working perfectly, but that's information technology for you. I can address those two specific points and a host of others if you want to. The workforce attendance is good. We're some of the best in the country in policing compared to other public sectors. So our staff have stepped forward courageously and bravely into fighting the coronavirus. And those staff that need to be at home for personal welfare and shielding reasons are at home, but the vast majority of them with agile kits and they're still working, supporting the front line of policing. In terms of serious and organised crime, I can give you an absolute reassurance that we do more serious and organised crime as well as serious crime. And the last 24 hours in West Yorkshire alone has shown that. So I can cover a few more things if you want, or whether you want to go through various questions, which I can come in and deal with in that sense.
Okay, I'll let you mention a few other issues and then we can come back with questions.
I'll go through a variety of things, and I don't wish to repeat what the Commissioner says, but I would like to go on record for thanking the Commissioner and his office for how supportive they've been of West Yorkshire Police during this crisis. As you can appreciate, we've been under significant pressure with the demands of the crisis, and the adaptation policing has had to make in a very short time frame to new legislation, new restrictions, new ways of working, and new societal issues, really. But I'm pleased to report that we've maintained routine policing throughout this. We've carried on protecting the vulnerable. We're able to police the new restrictions in a proportionate and balanced way. And I again want to say thank you to the public of West Yorkshire for all that they've done in supporting the NHS and care system of local authorities. So, you know the context of West Yorkshire from the media in terms of death rate, hospital admissions and ICU beds. I just want to reassure you that we're very engaged with the partnership approach in terms of the local resilience forum and strategic coordination group. I've got with me ACC Tim Kingsman, who's a very experienced commander and who has been involved from the outset in our Goals Command for Policing and as the joint chair of the LRF across West Yorkshire. But Robin Tuddenham from Calderdale Local Authority has been leading that and has done a fine job to date. It's worth mentioning, of course, that there are national strategic policing requirements, responsibilities for West Yorkshire Police, and we're also linked in with both the Home Office and the National Police Chiefs Council. As you'll have all seen from the media, there are some challenges for our country, in that you have the NHS and Public Health England, you have the Ministries, Communities, Housing and Local Government, you have the Home Office, and you have the Treasury, and they're all trying to come together to fight the same fight in that sense, but it's unusual on a local and national stage. I'm grateful for the Commissioner for his support in bringing together the local criminal justice board. I won't repeat what he's touched on. We're now starting to work to get other parts of the criminal justice agency as key workers back into work. Our policing style, led by Mr Kingsman, has been, as the Commissioner has said, in accordance with a national position. The compliance across West Yorkshire to the request of the Manchester Government about restrictions has been outstanding. I think on the whole, the public of West Yorkshire responded magnificently, and the vast majority of people, of the 2.5 million people who reside here, have done a brilliant job in complying with those restrictions to protect the care system and protect the NHS. We have had pockets of non-compliance, and I wouldn't say disobedience, I'd say non-compliance through people choosing to, and we've been trying to police those. As the Commissioner said, as I said to Home Affairs Select Committee last week and the week before, we've taken a very balanced approach to this, and so our approach has definitely been around explaining and engaging to people. On average, we probably issue about 160 warnings a day to people who haven't really got a reason as to why they're out and about. But that is an encouragement, it's not enforcement, it's an encouragement to say, okay, you now need to reconsider your contribution to society and you need to reconsider your approach to this. And we've only been issuing about 14 enforcements a day on average since the beginning of this. And I will repeatedly say those enforcements are for people who in the main are repeatedly breaching the legislation. And the officers and staff have been incredibly balanced, proportionate, and working up to it. It is not for people who are sitting on park benches. It's not for people who are unduly exercising. It is not for people who are travelling to exercise and things. It's for people who are deliberately breaching the processes and have had, in many cases, numerous previous other warnings. Our challenges around the high density population of some of our communities, some of the socio-economic deprivation issues, means that many of our residents don't have gardens and they don't even have a yard. And it's very difficult. I feel very sorry for some of those families who are in lockdown restrictions within a house within children. So we're supporting them where we can. My sort of concerns, as the Commissioner has highlighted around the wider criminal justice system, is around how we look after the vulnerable people within this. And again, that is, of course, domestic abuse, it's interfamiliar abuse, it's online abuse, it's sexual abuse, it's online bullying, it's all the crime that can occur within the household and on the internet. But turning to the workforce, as I've said, our attendance is good, our morale is good. I've been incredibly impressed by the overwhelming professionalism of the vast majority of our staff. We don't get everything right all of the time, and we're very open about that. But they've been put in a really difficult position to police something that we've never had to police before. But my staff are really clear that the policing of the virus, as much as the policing the public, they're trying to stop the virus spreading, not trying to be overzealous and police the public in an overbearing way. PPE for my staff, alongside everybody else, has been a significant issue. I will remind you that police officers and police staff are out there now without the PPE that we would wish that they would have, without all of the ability to protect themselves from the spread of this virus. But we've given them what we can, and when they need it, they've got access to it. But it is a tentative supply line that you've seen in the media. Very briefly, we have the Commissioner touched on. We've been fortunate in West Yorkshire that not only have we had good command and control and good contingency plans in place for dealing with such issues as this, albeit not a pandemic on this scale. We've also had the technological advances that both other agencies, other partner organisations and other police forces have had in terms of our agility and our ability to do our work from anywhere in the force. And we've bought, within a matter of a week, another 1,500 computers to get more people out there and agile. And that is the ability, apart from the start of this meeting, to be able to Skype and conference call, is the ability to transfer data live time into our servers and across the systems. And it's the simple things like if you remember me reporting before, I've got things like phone witness statements where we can take a statement remotely from somebody without having to go visit them. There's only 3 forces in the country who've been able to do that recently. There's far more are trying to get on top. And we've been using our body-worn videos for video interviews there and then, and extending the boundaries. So I would remind you, as you touched on earlier, that business as usual also is ongoing within this, which is good to see some of those crime reductions in those areas caused by the restrictions on society, and that's good to see less victims in that sense. But we are still dealing with murders, homicide, and serious and organised crime, serious death along the roads, albeit injury accidents have reduced. Tragic incidents of suicide, missing from harm within communities. It's all ongoing, but I can give you that reassurance. We've got the staff, the ability, the capability, and the commitment to deal with those. So all in all, I think West Yorkshire Police is in a good place. We're doing what we can to support the NHS and the care system. And whilst they have many challenges thrown at us, I think I'm heartened by the resilience of our staff to keep us in a good place. But there are still potentially, as we know from the media, many challenges ahead, potentially much sadness ahead for members of our community and for members of our wider policing family. But so far, so good, and that's down to the behaviour of the public of West Yorkshire, I think.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you for your report as well. I think the PPE issue is a national government issue, and we're all aware of it. We've seen it. The frontline staff, police, NHS don't have it. Okay, in terms of questions now, I'll let Masood come in. The last person goes first. Sorry, forgive me. And then I'll go in the sequences of questions I have noted from the panel members. So Masood. Masood Ahmed. Okay, Councillor Richard Dunbar, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. First of all, thank you to Mark and John. The references, very strong references that made to the work done around tackling domestic abuse in this crisis. As the WIC member for domestic abuse, it's obviously something I take very seriously and I've done a lot of work on. And one thing I'm absolutely clear about from not only speaking to survivors, but also to people working in victim support and other related organisations, is that without question, social distancing and isolation puts victims of domestic abuse more at risk. I think we're all very clear about that. I've got a little statement here, like some sentiments from a survivor, which I think the panel need to hear. And this was given to me the morning after the Prime Minister made the lockdown decision. And she said this, and I have a permission to share this. She said, the government needs to act quickly and put more money to support victims of domestic abuse, whilst being very clear about what groups and support is available in these times and beyond. Failing to act now will see an increase in domestic abuse incidents. Now, and I think unfortunately that's true, because if you're aware, there's a campaign group called Counting Dead Women, and what they've proved is in the period of 23rd of March, 12th of April, there have been 16 domestic murders within this country, and that's absolutely shocking, and that's more in a 3-week period than any other 3-week period of the past 10 years, so that's something that should concern us all. Now, in terms of that, and follow on, the government obviously launched their You Are Not Alone campaign by the Home Secretary, which only announced £2 million into the system, and is basically focused on awareness raising and online presence. And as important as that is, I think it's tokenism at best, because it's not really about supporting victims. So with those statements, I've got 4 questions which I think survivors will be very interested to know the answers to. So first of all, John referred to it, but we'll ask it again. What representations, Mark, are you making to government to ensure that our officers on the front line are getting the PPE they need in order to be safe as well as serving the public? So that's the first question. The second question is, what additional provisions are you put in place to support victims of domestic abuse to report at this time? Because it's different, it's not the same as it was before, because obviously they're in close proximity to the perpetrators. So maybe if we can take those 2 questions shared first, then I've got 2 more questions if that's okay. Which link to those?
Okay, thank you. Marshall?
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Richard, and the questions. And clearly, like you, when the Prime Minister made those initial announcements, we all sort of anticipated that there will be some real problems in this sort of domestic settings. I mean, he touched on the domestic murder figures, and actually one of the other things that I'm doing on a weekly basis, and the latest call was yesterday with the policing minister. All police and crime commissioners are dialing in through the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and we are following up on key issues as part of those meetings. And actually, yesterday we had a further update on that trend, if you like, regarding the prevalence of domestic homicides. And whilst we always need to be very cautious around this, but I think the numbers since the period you mentioned there has actually, thankfully, steadied down. So they haven't seen the same level of domestic homicide murders since that date. But of course, it's something we will need to watch very closely. In terms of PPE, I know John will want to come in on this. I think, to be fair, we've made a number of representations around PPE, including I signed a joint letter to the Home Secretary as Vice Chair of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, urging the Home Secretary to look specifically at PPE for policing generally. Again, and I'm pleased to say that through the LRF meetings, this clearly gets discussed on a wider basis daily, but certainly within policing, working with other police forces, other PCCs, and the Home Office, I think we've managed to secure a relatively stable situation. But of course, we all know about the issues of logistics and supply chains, cash flow issues as well. But I think we're starting to get on top of that. But again, I know John will want to come in. I think I agree with you actually on yes, we did have this announcement by the Home Secretary. There's some extra funding for the national helplines, domestic abuse helplines, and clearly, whilst none of us would disagree with the sentiment and the intention behind that, I think the evidence is we remain to be convinced around the sort of referrals that will potentially follow through from that, from a number of these national helplines, and that's why I've moved very quickly to secure some additional funding for services like independent domestic violence advocates and independent sexual violence advocates, locally commissioned through West Yorkshire, through victim services. But again, you'll see in one of the appendices to this meeting a pledge that I've made to the local service providers around working with them to do whatever we can to put in place additional support to potential victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. So absolutely, Richard, we have recognised that and moved to put some additionality in. But of course, we want further funding and support from government to bolster that approach, rather than putting too much into these national helplines, where I'm not entirely convinced that we see the sort of outcomes that we would want. John, would you like to come in?
Yeah, on the PPE, the National Policing has set up its own supply line that runs alongside the LRF one, that runs alongside the NHS one. On a regional basis, the Yorkshire Humber region have come together to procure PPE as well, independently of that national supply line. And West Yorkshire Police has also, specifically in the first couple of weeks, taken all steps it could reasonably make to acquire PPE for its staff. On the soft converse, we've also been supplying PPE to those hospitals who've been running out of aprons. We've been supplying high-end crime scene investigator liquid repellent outfits at weekends as and when they've needed them, because their needs has been greater than ours. So we've got sufficient to put some care in place for our staff, but it's limited stocks, and as the rest of the country are suffering, it's a charge to keep on top of it. In terms of the specific support for victims of domestic abuse and safeguarding issues since the start of the COVID pandemic, we've adapted very quickly our structures, because we share the same concerns from the outset as everybody else. And so our Central Safeguarding Governance Unit daily monitors every report, but also every potential report and incident that comes in. And we've adapted the way in which we work in the Commissioner's support that it does, so they are also proactively contacting potential high risk and medium risk previous victims of domestic abuse to check up and support them. We've run 3 specific campaigns for the perpetrators of domestic abuse, for potential victims of domestic abuse, and for everybody as third party advocates to make sure that people are looking after domestic abuse victims. We've relaunched our online and our Bright Sky app, which is a covert app, in order for victims to report, as well as promoting the 999 and 55 covert reporting domestic abuse to people. So we've also trained our frontline to be professionally inquisitive as to why people might be out and about, and are they actually the victim of domestic abuse and fleeing domestic abuse but not wanting to disclose. We're very carefully monitoring arrest rates, throughput, oversight, crime recording. And so we are, wholeheartedly doing all that we can to bring extra things into play, because it is a different place. I'm pleased to report that, not pleased to report, I'm sad to report that our arrest rate has remained as high as it was before, and our throughput and our reporting is still there. But we don't yet know what's not been reported to us. But we are, in answer to your question, we've been very proactive in trying to safely get to potential victims and safely get the message through to people as to how they can contact us.
Thank you. Chair, I've got 2 more follow-on questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, go on, Richard, you may as well.
Yeah, so this is more looking towards the post-crisis restrictions start to sort of get lifted. So Nicole Jacobs, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales, has spoke recently about post-lockdown reporting. So particularly because I think some incidents like common assault and harassment, I think you, and I'm sure John will correct me if I'm wrong, after it being reported within a certain length of time. So actually, what pressure we're putting on government to ensure that if this crisis goes on beyond those reporting periods, if victims come forward and it's beyond the 6 months, what pressure will be put on government to accept it beyond that usual anticipated time? And the second one is around sort of victim support more generally. I know Dame Vera Baird, when she was in my shots recently, very clearly made reference to and has stated that there is not enough money and resource within the victim support services the moment. And what I'm because survivors and works in the field is that because of there's going to be a massive backlog of cases, so how are we going to be able to
resource and the support we know victims need post this crisis when they're obviously not as isolated, not in perhaps as in regular contact with perpetrators and potential perpetrators.
Yeah, I'll come in first. So thanks again, Richard, for that. And again, just to let you know that we're now dialing into weekly calls with Vera Baird, who is the National Victims Commissioner, and Nicole Jacobs as well is on those calls because, as you said, there's a number of emerging issues here. And only yesterday, actually, on my weekly call with the Chief Constable, John, I did reference the looking at the recovery planning and what the world might look like once restrictions start to be lifted. So absolutely we need to start looking at planning ahead for that. Again, I get the ability to raise issues directly with ministers. And again, as you know, as you said, Vera Baird was in West Yorkshire to jointly launch the victim strategy that I produced at West Yorkshire a few weeks back. And I worked very closely with Vera when she was the Police and Crime Commissioner for Northumbria. And I think we're all agreed that the money that's currently made available for victim services, it wasn't enough then, and it certainly isn't enough now. So I think collectively with other VCCs, we're going to be making a real case around increased funding, particularly in the circumstances we now find ourselves in. So good points, Richard, and we're definitely working on them as we speak.
Sorry, Chair, just in terms of the 6-month issue, that's in relation to summary-only offences, and the National Police Chiefs Council is making representation to government to extend that to allow for summary-only offences to be prosecuted beyond 6 months due to the COVID crisis. The other issues around harassment, coercive and controlling behaviour, specific crime types don't have time limits on them. So that's where there's just some clarity of it. So we are making those representations. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Masood, you've come back again. So, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, yeah?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just want to echo some of the stuff that John and Mark have said about the 4E's. I think Mark mentioned quite a bit about the engage, explain, encourage and enforce. And I just want to thank John and his officers and team really, because in terms of the weekly reports that we get about the community impact, but as well as in terms of the management of local wards with the officers that they deploy and in dispersing groups of individuals, considering what we see in the media and in other parts of the country, people say that they're getting fixed penalties or tickets left, right and centre for no apparent reason, or they've been harassed because they're not out jogging or they're not out walking their dog or something of that nature. I mean, I just want to echo with the relationship we've had with the neighbourhood policing team, as well as the input from Julie Sykes, who just recently sent us an update as well. Has been really well received, and I just want to echo that from my community so far. The relationship we've had, obviously the difficult relationship we've had throughout the country at the moment with what's going on. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Masood, for those comments. And you know, as I referenced earlier, it is really good to hear that the local neighbourhood policing teams are playing that role in what I would term sort of common sense policing, because yes, there was some publicity 2 or 3 weeks back around some of the policing approaches in other parts of the country, but I think by and large that hasn't happened in West Yorkshire. But as John has said, you know, where enforcement needs to happen because people are deliberately ignoring advice and have been repeatedly spoken to, then quite rightly, you know, enforcement measures are put in place. But policing last weekend, which I know, to be fair, John sort of wasn't particularly enamoured with either. So, you know, we just need to constantly urge the public to follow the advice, not only protecting other people's lives, but themselves as well.
So, thanks for your comments.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, Richard and Masood. Peter, did you want to ask a question? Councillor Peter Gruen?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, good morning to both of you. And as usual, thank you for a very comprehensive introduction to the report. I was very pleased to hear your comments. I think it's true to say that the police have been put in an unenvious position in terms of the responsibilities thrust upon you. And I really am very sorry to hear that PPE is an issue, because frankly, we know police officers often put themselves in harm's way in their normal duties. But to ask them to do so deliberately and not to then provide the kind of PPE equipment that everybody is entitled to have in those circumstances, I think is very, very regrettable. So thank you for doing all you can on that front too. My questions are around two different areas. The first is about resources. So for several months now we've been talking about recruitment and how stretched West Yorkshire Police are. And so they've got a whole new set of responsibilities which they, in terms of their engaging and educating, have to do. And I guess that falls mainly on the police neighbourhood teams. What are they not doing because they are now doing this extra work? And the second area of questions, particularly to the Commissioner, really is in terms of you holding the Chief to account in your daily and weekly meetings. To what extent are you part of being consulted on decisions being made? Or is it more a question of the Chief telling you what they are doing operationally?
Okay, well, thanks for both those, Peter. And I will, on the first one, yes, resources-wise, we are incurring extra costs, as you would imagine. Again, I'm pleased to say that we are well represented and plugged in at a national level, not only through myself, but through the force as well, and the Chief Finance Officer for West Yorkshire Police, Nigel Brook, I know plays a significant role there. So we are collating a lot of that information around potential extra bids in to cover that funding. And again, on the call yesterday with the Policing Minister, Kit Malthouse, there are ongoing conversations with the Treasury regarding flexibility on this so-called uplift funding that was earmarked for the recruitment programme. And we're told there'll be some announcements in the next few days, because, again, and you've alluded to it, the world that we're now in, compared to 6 weeks ago or thereabouts, is totally different. So we're urging flexibility within the existing funding that's been announced for the recruitment programme. And I'll probably bring John in a moment on the perhaps what officers are not doing as opposed to what they are doing. But to be fair, you know, I think that they're trying to cover all bases still, but it is difficult. In terms of the holding to account, I mean, clearly it's a mixture of both. So John and I discuss all range of issues on the weekly bilateral, but of course daily as well. And obviously it's not my role to interfere, nor would I, in operational decision making. But again, an element of common sense comes into these conversations, and we approach it in a mature way. So you know, I think we've got the balance about right at the moment.
So just in terms of funding, we've spent over £3 million of budgeted money so far on responding to this. We've needed to do that, but of course we'll be very balanced in everything we do, and we've got to be wary of overusing our staff as well. In terms of neighbourhood policing, the benefit is there's been a slight reduction in crime. There's been a 20% reduction in crime, and much of those crimes are what neighbourhood policing team officers would be involved in. But we have had a greater, during this period, we've actually gone to more incidents, and most of those are neighbourhood policing team officers in their communities dealing with coronavirus-related reported incidents. So they are still engaging, and they're engaging around the encouraging, the explaining, and the protecting the public from the spread of the virus. So they're still dealing with hate crime, and they're still dealing with crimes that matter to communities. They will probably be doing a little bit less of the longer-term problem solving and some of the longer-term engagement activity, which will just have to go on to hold at this moment in time. But equally, at that same time, communities have changed because of the lockdown, because of compliance. Some of the antisocial behaviour that physically is happening is not happening it was there before. So to be quite frank, through the neighbourhood policing teams, they're able to cope at the moment. However, what we haven't had is the significant pandemic impact upon policing in terms of a loss of a significant amount of staff. But we've got contingency plans in place to bolster neighbourhood policing teams with other officers who will just step away from their roles, whether that be in training, driver training, and other non-frontline activities. So we are not losing the benefit of having the neighbourhood policing teams. They're just doing their job in a different way, supporting communities in a different way.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you. Now, Mark wanted to ask a question, and then I'll go through the sequence, and then Tariq at last.
Hi, thank you. It was just a question on funding of PPE. I'm not sure I understand that we can, or the Commission can get money for additional hundreds of computers, but the procurement team in the police can't get a few pounds worth of eye protection, masks, or whatever else they need on PPE. Why they have to go back to government and slow the whole process down?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's not slowing the process down, because clearly we are, where we need to buy and invest in certain things, we're getting on with that. The message that has come from ministers, and certainly as part of the conversations, no doubt with the chiefs as well, is that they will look to reimburse PCC's forces on the additional costs associated with COVID, and obviously we've got to document all that and then put a bid in at a slightly later date. But as I've said, Nigel Brook, the Chief Finance Officer, and indeed my Treasurer at the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office are looking at that closely, and we will certainly try and hold the government to account in providing additional funding where we have incurred COVID-related extra costs. But as you can imagine, we will have to sort of set that out in some detail. But just to reassure you, it isn't stopping us from doing certain things at the moment. John?
Yeah, so I think, sorry, forgive me if I confused it on the PPE and the money. The PPE issue is not that very cavalier. I don't mean it like that. Actually, we can access. It's a matter of access. It's about supply and getting to the right designation and the right compliance amount of kit. And so it's a matter of sourcing it. Personal protective equipment at all times of their duty, and as and when they encounter definite COVID-related matters, they will be putting gloves and masks and aprons on. And if they're dealing with high-end COVID risks around dead bodies and high harm issues, they don't want us to wear it all. Routine policing will still carry on like the rest of society without PPE being worn at all times. So we have got sufficient to do what we need to do in a proportionate way. The very first couple of weeks were very difficult for our staff, but it depends what happens with the pandemic now. It depends
depends how much the spread grows or goes away. But actually, have we got enough money, access to the money to buy what we can? Yes, we have. Can we get what we can? Not all of the time because of the national issues, the international issues.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, John. I think it's a sort of an alarm bell to be prepared for something like this in future. Not that this standard or the way this has escalated nationally to the maximum, but otherwise, in terms of this kind of equipment for the future, God forbid, I hope not. Now, Charlie, did you want to ask a question on hate crime before we move on?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. Just recently I read an article in The Independent about the coronavirus and the blame going on the Muslim community. Maybe a national issue, but can I ask if it's an issue in West Yorkshire, and if so, are we chasing it, particularly the far right, sending disinformation and all videos of people going in and out of mosques?
Yeah, thanks for that question, sorry. So, in actual fact, it was something I followed up with the Chief Constable yesterday in our weekly bilateral meeting. I think the reporting incidents of hate crime generally has remained fairly stable, but as you would imagine, the online space has tended to be the arena where there's perhaps more activity at the moment. So there have been some isolated cases of that type of behaviour, but at this moment in time, nothing out of the ordinary, unless John is going to say something different.
No, at the very outset, there was literally one or two anti-Chinese hate crime which were dealt with appropriately. The overall hate crime levels are lower than they were pre-pandemic, probably higher than I would have expected. The majority of that is online hatred. I think what you're alluding to is the vicious and vile members of society who used to use any opportunity to further their cause, and that's the extreme right wing. We haven't had any issues of that within West Yorkshire to date of any significant nature where people are trying to divide communities by blaming other communities to be involved. So that's not there isn't a significant issue for that here, but I'm aware of the article, and we do have hate crime and community tension monitoring ongoing all the time for that.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that. Councillor Amanda Carter, did you want to? Councillor Amanda Carter, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. It's been partly answered. It's in particular about domestic violence. It's very difficult for supporting agencies to act and try to get mainly women out of these difficult situations at the moment because they can't actually move. I always have 5 or 6 DV cases on at one time. And I have to say that all the agencies are rising up to the challenge. The issue that I have, and it's even before COVID arrived, it was not the acute cases, because I think the police tend to deal with those very well, but it's when the marriage has ended, but then they still be a problem. And now that COVID is around, it's more difficult for those people in those difficult situations, particularly if the perpetrator has access to the children. So I'm getting a lot of calls about that. And secondly, about PPE. I don't know what items you're particularly short of, but in terms of procurement, there is a factory in Honley actually that makes latex gloves, and you can buy gloves and masks from chemists. So there is these things about. It's a question of sourcing them, and I can't understand why some agencies can source them and others can't. It seems to me that it's more of an organisational problem.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I mean, on the first point regarding domestic violence victims, rescue victims, you're right. There are some real complexities to some of these cases, and certainly the referenced in my opening statement the meeting of the domestic and sexual violence board that comes together. In fact, they only met yesterday. And also we are dialing into the national victims meetings that I referenced as well. So we are picking up some of these complexities. And again, from my own office, I've got a safeguarding advisor that is linking in and picking up on these issues with our partners, but obviously within local authorities as well, because they are all represented on the on that board that I've mentioned. So we are trying to put measures in place to actually pick up on those types of issues that you mentioned around the post-Marac sort of assessment cases, and look to provide a bit more bespoke intervention and support where possible. That clearly the situation is made more difficult because of COVID. On the PPE, again, just to reiterate that I think from a policing perspective, because of the joint work that's gone on, not only within the LRF but also more widely with other police forces and police and crime commissioners, I think we're in a relatively better position than what we were a few weeks ago. But it is useful to hear about local firms and contacts and that might be able to assist. So thanks for passing that information on.
Yeah, forgive me if I wasn't. We are okay for PPE. We've got it. We are exploiting those local avenues as well. Gloves has never been a particular problem for us because we use high volumes of gloves anyway. We've probably now got a month's supply of PPE, but I think it has been just sporadic for agencies all trying to get the same place. But I do take on board what you said. That's a very valid point around domestic abuse. The high volume ones doesn't mean that they're not high personal impact and potentially high harm to individuals as well. So again, we are still focused on the higher risk and the medium risk, but of course every other aspect gets the same support as well. But yeah, we'll certainly recheck whether we've been to Honley, but we've nearly knocked on every chemist store, every pharmacy store, and the farming industry in all sorts of places, but as in other people. But thank you for that.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it has been a national issue, to be honest, and beyond everybody's control. Roger, thank you for waiting patiently. You've got a few questions?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mark, Jane, and a virtual handshake to you, John.
Yeah, morning.
Yeah, just on PPE, I have quite a bit of knowledge of PPE. I'll be talking about it later today, but just to give you an illustration of the difference in costs, it's not just about supply. In January, 100 adult medical face masks cost £8. They're now between £60 and £100 in many places. It's just the market forces. So you can source, but you do look wider afield in order to try and save money. So it's not just a supply issue. The costs have gone up astronomically. I've got just four, I think, short, pointed questions, really. One, I think probably John can answer, please. It's about workforce well-being, and I'm very pleased to hear the fact that the force doesn't appear to be as affected by coronavirus as some other organisations. But it's specifically about BAME. We now know there's sufficient evidence to show that the prevalence of COVID-19 among BAME seems quite a lot higher than amongst other populations. Is that being reflected at all in the force across both officers, staff and specials and PCSOs? Secondly, about vulnerability, whilst there's been some successes, say in relation to responding to rough sleeping, the statistics released yesterday was that only 5% of vulnerable children were in fact attending school. And we'll all remember that, in a sense, one of the reasons schools kept open wasn't just for key workers, but was to provide a refuge for vulnerable children. Is this awful figure that 95% of children are sort of gone missing in some way from the system, being reflected anyway in policing, missing persons and the like? My third question relates to enforcement. And Mark, you referred to in your report the 121 tickets being issued by West Yorkshire as opposed to 150, notwithstanding the data quality perhaps in North Yorkshire. Now we all know that North Yorkshire is about a third as big as West Yorkshire in population and in probably policing. So what messages, if any, should we draw from those two comparative statistics? And then fourthly, what plans do you have to look at your police and crime plan as a result of COVID-19 outbreak?
Okay, thank you. John, did you want to come in on the first one?
Yeah, on the first one, there's no statistical variance in relation to BAME employees who are either suffering from COVID, symptomatic of COVID, self-isolated from COVID, or who are shielding or more vulnerable. There's numerous reports out about this. The last I heard of the Local Resilience Forum was that BAME, all the science is saying that BAME members of our community are not more likely to get it, but more of them are getting it, and that's in relation to the spread. So it wasn't an association with some physical issue. It was just that more BAME members of the public and more BAME NHS will get it. Again, that's not my area. The question was, are more of our BAME staff suffering? No, they're not, in that sense. But we have a whole host of welfare things in around people and care packages, occupational health, post-trauma incident. The one that's vexing my staff somewhat is being spat at in the face, being coughed at in the face, and that's causing them some significant upset. But thankfully, the criminal justice system has taken a robust approach to that, but I prefer it were not happening in the first place rather than seeing people being punished for it. Because it doesn't just affect them, it affects the families, and many of them have got families who are undergoing chemotherapy and other things, and they just can't return home after that happens. I digress, I apologise. There isn't a great employee issue.
Okay, thanks, John. Just picking up on the other one. So, yes, I saw that report as well, Roger. In fact, I thought in some instances it was even down to 1% in terms of attendance of vulnerable children at school. So that is a real concern. I know the LGA have issued some guidance in relation to working around sort of vulnerability. And again, I think that was discussed at the board that was held yesterday. But again, I know there are some West Yorkshire Police schools officers that are allocated, and I think we will need to get them to do some more work to have a look at this, because I think it is a concern that we all have, albeit the instances of missing persons hasn't transpired. In fact, it's gone down quite significantly across the board, so it doesn't appear to be manifesting itself in that type of reporting and activity. With regards to the enforcement, and John might want to comment on this one as well, I mean, obviously this is one that we keep on the daily sort of review as well, and obviously North Yorkshire is geographically a huge county, and of course we border North Yorkshire in many places, so there is a potential for people crossing the border to visit sort of tourist or beauty spots within North Yorkshire, which probably might explain some of the higher instances of enforcement in North Yorkshire. But again, when you look at the number of enforcements that have been issued in West Yorkshire, it's actually probably below where you might expect us to see in the sort of league tables, given the size of West Yorkshire. But again, hopefully we've tried to give some earlier reassurance about how that is being enforced. And then on the police and crime plan, it's a good point. We were in the process of about to do a refresh, an annual refresh, but we are having to look again, of course, at the COVID situation, and that work is underway. Right.
Sorry, just in relation to the vulnerability of the children, again, it's primarily a matter for local authorities and children's services, but of course we're linked in, and what Commissioner was referring to is we're using some of the same schools officers to track and identify some of those vulnerable children who should be in school. Not our responsibility, but our responsibility is to make sure that they've got care and welfare in the community as well. We haven't seen a greater impact upon missing from home or other areas, but we are linked in with social services and children's services around supporting access to those vulnerable people, because I definitely share your concern as a resident about the impact. In terms of the North Yorkshire comparator, I'm speaking to my colleague, Chief Constable Lisa Winwood in North Yorkshire. She talks about communities being very naturally self-isolating by geography. In order to reach restrictions, they have to drive on many occasions to get places. They also took a more forward-facing stance to their enforcement at the beginning, if you remember, around accusations of roadblocks and things. So I think their numbers were more around, as the Commissioner said, about people travelling for exercise when they maybe don't need to, travelling to see people when they maybe don't need to. But I'm quite content that we're in the right place, because again, as I said earlier, many of our communities are more densely populated. It's more a cultural issue as well. But I think it's just different forces, different issues potentially.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, John. Now we've got Richard. Did you want to ask a question? Sorry, Richard, did you want to ask a question?
No, I'm all right. I've asked what I needed to ask there. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions from anybody? Well, good timing. We're near to the end of meeting, so now, okay, if that leaves us, nothing else on item 5 then? No. Okay. Item 6, publish key decisions. There are no decisions to report.
Chair, just to comment on that, so I know we briefly discussed this on our briefing earlier this week. As you can imagine, we've had to put a lot of different working practices in place, and we've all been, for obvious reasons, concentrated on responding to COVID. But we have now, as of yesterday, updated a number of key decisions onto the website. I just want to reassure you that that hasn't been forgotten, and we've now got round to doing that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on published key decisions? No. So, Commissioner, your response to any current issues? Mark?
Well, Chair, I think it's been covered in item 5 in terms of key responses. So I know that's a standing item, but it's basically been covered in the earlier report.
Okay, then we've got item 8, agreed action log, which is attached in the report.
Now, again, Chair, I know Kelly within my office has discussed that with Sam in terms of outstanding work and actions, and I don't think there's anything sort of untoward there at the moment, Sam, from my understanding.
Yeah, that's fine. And then item 9 on the forward agenda plan. Any comments from anybody? Jen, 8 decisions have been published on the website, so there's a message from Jane from January to April. So, okay, before...
Sorry, again, Chair, I know our briefing we discussed that clearly none of us know for sure how long we're going to be in this situation, so it's really that we will endeavour to work with you behind the scenes on what is sort of relevant and appropriate in terms of agenda setting for future meetings, but obviously we'll endeavour to do whatever we can to get through what is appropriate in the COVID situation that we're in.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, Mark. There was a
question or request that the next meeting is on 12th of June. Will we have a delivery quarterly report if possible?
Yes, I think it's our intention to still go ahead with that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question, obviously, there's the uncertainty because of COVID-19, and we don't know how long it'll go for. So all the elections are postponed till next year. Now we're not sure whether we'll have the Manchester model of policing in West Yorkshire. I don't know when that sort of ruling will come out. Do you want to comment anything? I know you wanted a report on elections moving on to next year, the procedure.
Yeah, just to say that, obviously we were in conversations with the Combined Authority. As you know, the West Yorkshire Leaders deal on devolution was done pretty much just before this situation came about on COVID, and then that led to a decision of the cancellation of PCC elections and local elections that should have taken place in early May. So, as it stood, the transition of the OPCC would have happened in 2024 to coincide with the mayor election then. But obviously we're in a different world to what we were a few weeks ago, and we're in conversation, but there's a lot of work that would need to be undertaken for that to happen for May of next year, when the first mayor elections are, and there'll have to be consultation, and all that. It will work. It is work that will need to be done in the background. So I can't really say any more than that at this point in time.
Thank you, Mark. The other question which has been flagged up in the panel, you don't have to answer now, is the confirmation of Chief Executive's position. Now, obviously, now other things have taken over, the COVID and etc. Elections have moved on. So, just something to mention to you about your Chief Executive's appointment.
Yes, and because of the fact that we were coming up to a period potential in the elections, and now COVID, I'm sure you can appreciate that it hasn't been something that has been at the top of the to-do list. But I can assure you that we have got things in place to make sure there's stability in the short to medium term.
Thank you, Mark. So, any other comments, questions, or anything I have missed which panel members want to bring to my attention, apart from the minutes which were agreed and confirmed in the pre-section session, but I didn't mention in this meeting? Other than that, is there anything I've missed out? No, thank you, Roger. Okay, so that concludes today's meeting after a big, hard struggle trying to get everybody set up. The positive thing is that now we're all set up, we know how to access these virtual meetings, so hopefully it'll be better next time and we can meet. I hope this COVID situation settles down and we can have our proper meetings and go back to normality. I mean, the whole world is under siege in a way at the moment, so it's difficult times for everybody in all aspects. So, any other comments from anybody?
Chair, just to add my thanks again for everybody for working together to get this meeting done and undertaken. And of course, I will definitely work with you and my office to facilitate further meetings if we need to continue in this format.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark, and it's good to see all the panel members who are fit and well and been able to take part in today's meeting. I mean, I've had very close friends who have been affected with the coronavirus very badly. One's on the ventilator,
now he's been taken to Manchester because not enough oxygen in his blood level. Another one's very serious. A friend of mine who went to school with me. I've seen another few deaths in the community, so it's everywhere. It's good to see all panel members here or meet them, and look forward to meet you all again in June, if not before.
Thanks,
So I think that concludes your side.
Yeah. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Jane.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye all. Thank you. Thank you, John, Max, Jane, and your team. And that's right. Back to our panel colleagues. Okay. Are we back to normal now? Yeah. There's 13 of us now, so big. Oh, that was a big number. There was quite a few from Mark's team. Right. Item 10 on complaints received by the panel. We've had a little session earlier on. Any other comments? We've got Gillian's version as well, and Sam sent the legal documentation. Anything else on that?
That's just a note.
Okay, just a note, right. Any other business? Okay. Well, that concludes today's meeting. So can I thank everybody for taking part in this meeting, and I wish you well. Keep safe. That's all I can say. And then our next meeting is obviously on Friday, the 12th of June, with our pre-meeting. We will have a pre-meeting, won't we, Sam?
Yes. I think it's important that we do, and we can sort out any technology issues as well. In the meantime, we'll obviously be working with people now. We've tried it once. Hopefully, we can finesse things and get it spot on if we have to do this remotely again. We'll work on the assumption that we need to do. It would be great if we actually get to meet in public, but I'm not sure that we will. So we'll just keep working on the technology solutions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we've got any teething issues, like my video's gone off, while we were in the meeting, I've texted the IT officer. So straight after this, I'm going to sort out all the teething issues. So equally, if we can just be prepared, it's a useful tool, even if the COVID situation relaxes, and we come to real meetings, but it's good to have these Skype meetings. So whenever there's a need, we can do them. So we've got a message from Amanda. Thank you. Keep safe. Yeah, thanks. So is that it then? So we can conclude, and thank you everybody, and keep safe and look after yourself and do your daily exercises and eat well, less drink, more vitamin C. Or D. Yeah, okay. So, okay. Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, we can all switch off now. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.